Hi, I'm Tim, welcome to The Restoration Couple. Today's video is going to be all about getting the bed structure built and installed, so stick around and I'll show you how I got on. Today we're going to be looking at the bed end of the van. So I'm going to be building or finishing off the kind of dividers between each section and doing a little bit of work on those, and then hopefully we can get moving on the rest of the interior fit out. Right, so it's day 2 of the van build out with the interior at least, and I've just cut the second of the front quarters of the bed. So this is the one we did yesterday. See if I can wedge it in. Kind of made a little sister of that one, so it's not quite as deep. That one had to be deeper because of the kitchen. This one only needs to be as deep as the toilet. I haven't scribed this one in tight yet. Alright, take a few slithers off that, then we can scribe it. What I'm trying to do is keep everything as square to the floor as possible. And as I was in the garage, the batteries just turned up, so we'll have a quick peek at those. Now I'll talk batteries when we come to the electrical side of the things in another video, but these ones are sized so I can get 2 underneath the passenger seat. Oh, actually they're quite heavy. Now I'm using conventional plywood. This is a paint grade hardwood faced plywood, but of course the end grain or the side of the plywood is not really a paint grade finish at all. Now, one of the go-to materials for motorhomes and camper van builds is a pre-faced plywood. It's got like a vinyl plasticky sort of finish on it, and you can get them in a variety of different colours, and right from the outset I wanted to stay clear of that. And that's for a few reasons. One, it's blooming expensive. It's kind of £80, maybe 100 quid a sheet, and for the amount of it you'd use, it really does rack up the price. Plus I wanted a painted finish anyway because I wasn't keen on that sort of more commercial look. So that meant we could go this route. Now this is 18mm ply, so rather than the 15mm furniture board that you can use. The thing is, we're not using masses of this anyway. Most of the build, the internals and things like that are going to be made up of much thinner plywood. So for the small amount of it we're using, maybe less than 1 whole sheet of 18mm, it just didn't make sense to start getting the more expensive stuff. And secondly, actually it doesn't really save huge amounts of weight. They call it a lightweight plywood, but there's easier ways to save on weight, I would say, than to go that route. So when you use that vinyl faced plywood, then on all your cut edges, most people use like a hammer-in rubber moulding, and you tap it into a groove that you cut. Again, that wasn't for me, but being plywood, the end is not well, it's susceptible to looking pretty naff if you paint it. So it needs a little bit of work, and I'm just playing around here with rounding it over and kind of getting a bit of shaping on it. But what we do need to do is all of these edges, especially where there's any voids, we're going to run some filler on all of the cut edges once they're finished, prior to sanding a final sand and paint, and that'll give us a lot more of a solid wood look on the edges. Then we'll use the router, take off the edges, put a bit of a round over on them, and then we'll look at kind of painting and filling and doing all that good stuff. might have been more effective to fill it and sand it first to get the edge right, and then do the router, but then you might end up with bits to fill after that anyway, so I think we'll be alright as we go here. Good. That's all 4 of the bed supports done. The round over bit leaves a pretty good edge, but that one's a bit old and ropey, so I did go over and sand just a little bit just to make sure there was no rough bits. But it's looking pretty, it certainly feels smooth, but you know, with anything, as soon as you paint it, it will show up all sorts of little divots and bits that need to be filled. Lastly, I was hoping to use the HVLP sprayer to at least do all the primer sprayed rather than a roller, but I just can't trust this weather, and I'm not gonna kind of set up in here. It just would take too long, so I'll just get the roller out and we can give them a couple of coats. As I say, with painting, the key is preparation, which I failed on miserably. I'm obviously in a dusty environment here, but I didn't have anywhere to lay them out to dry, simply because the rains stop-start all day. So I've got kind of pieces everywhere down here, so I can't really get out of that door. And anywhere remotely stable has now got something drying on it, so I'm kind of stuck in here for a bit. Okay, bit of an explanation before I get any further. I've just got these ready to fit. Taken the cutout here is what's going to hold our support for the bunk beds, and down the bottom, don't you see there, I've screwed in a strip like a batten to this, which will then be screwed down into the floor. And then lastly, on the back side, I've done 4 pocket holes that I can screw in on an angle just into this wall paneling, and that'll just kind of hold it tight where we scribe to the wall, and then once all the other fittings are in, then we can caulk it and finish it off nicely. But we want to get this really square to the floor. Everything else is going to be built off these. Couldn't find that big framing square, so I'm going to have to use a square piece of plywood, but I just want to make sure that we're vertical. Right, that's really nice and straight, solid. Unfortunately, I haven't got any suitably beefy screws to go down into the floor, so I'll put some drywall screws in there for now, and then we can come back and put some big ones in the future. So you can see the idea here, rather than the initial idea of putting a bracket on the wall to hang the bunks in. The bunks are actually going to be, I think they call it pipe cop, like almost like a sailing type canvas stretched between two poles, like a stretcher almost. They're going to bear down and sit on these ledges. Now they were going to be just bolted through to the rib along there, but I figured it's just as easy to put a notch in here, and as well as it being screwed to the wall, the bearing strength will be down onto this plywood. So it's kind of just belts and braces. I know what you're probably thinking, why haven't I done the doors yet? Just can't bring myself to do it. It's just such a fiddly, curvy, bespoke job. I've got to psych myself up and do it properly rather than take any shortcuts. But I've kind of made some templates ready and I know what I'm going to do, but I'm just I'm not quite there yet. They're a standalone project anyway. I've actually been cutting the 2x4 beams that are going to go on there, and I've applied some knotting on those because they will be painted white as well, so it should speed up a bit now. The reason I drilled them in situ was because I wanted to get obviously the walls are angled like this, but we want the beds flat. So I've eyeballed it, but we've kind of gone in horizontal. I've gone almost all the way through, so I'll take them down now, finish them off, and then I'll cut some slots in there so that they become kind of U-shaped drop-in holes. I could have measured it and then tilted the table on the pillar drill, and I think this will be out fine. It just means that the poles will bear down on the whole of the timber. Otherwise, if we just drilled them in normally, then they'd just be resting on the corner of the timber. Right, so I've chopped in those slots now. I should have done it on the table saw really. I used the jigsaw and then I just had to do a load of cleaning up with the sander, and then just I wrapped a broom handle with a sandpaper and got in there as smooth as I could, but it's a little bit rustic. So I've got to try and get them back in position now. That right? Up here I kind of just cut a little end scroll or something on there just to finish it off, and it makes just the end of it bear down onto all of this. If I cut a little rebate in here, it would only sit on half of the plywood, so that made more sense to me. Now once I'm happy that I've got this in position, then I'll put the big screws through into the plywood fairing strips or battens that we've got behind the plywood panelling. That would just hold this really tight flat to it, and then even though it's bearing down on here, so the weight is more on the plywood than the wall, but it's kind of shared. So this is where I got up to before it got too dark. The beams are in for the supports for the holes for the top bunks. It's just down below where I've got all the benches that I'm struggling, and I'll give you a look. Now this all boils down to me being stubborn for one, but also wanting the van to do just about everything, and that's why it's getting a little bit more tricky back here. So the problem with doing it this way and being super flexible and kind of a jack of all trades is the fact that the van won't have any suitable storage for clothing, but also the seats aren't deep enough to fold out to make the bed, or to pull out to make the bed. So what we've decided on is 2 camping pods, we're going to call them. They're basically like removable benches, bench seats, and they'll have full length drawer slides that will pull all, like full extension ones, so we can kind of get to everything without having to take down the bed, because the whole concept is that we can have a permanent bedroom back here for 4 people and not have to make it every day. You'll have to use your imagination a little bit, but basically back here there's so many different configurations that we can have. So we've got bunks up top, which although I'd be just touching both sides, you could essentially fit adults up there, so you could have 2 adults and a load of stuff below, like bikes or cargo or something, if you were just doing a trip. Or you can have the kids up here, and if we wanted to during the day, then this could be made back into 2 sofas, and you can still sit below the bunks. The bunks can then move, you can unhook one of them and sit it on top of the other one to make it even more spacious, or they'll roll up and go into their bunk storage locker at the front, which will make it full height in here. And then down below, then you've got the option of having the 2 sofas facing each other, just like a little lounge area. We have got another table which we're going to be able to use from the front, so if you wanted to move the table you could, and it can fit back here, probably just freestanding. Or of course, last of all, then you can make this into a full-time bed. So it's just kind of keeping it all flexible and trying to work out a way of doing it Wallace and Gromit style, so we can have stuff folding into each other, but also not too complicated that you need some sort of kind of doctorate to use it. Because of course, if we're lending this out to friends, I don't really want to be giving them a tuition sort of lesson for 2 hours on how to make the bed. So it needs to be self-explanatory, probably just the interlocking bed slats, which is kind of the norm, isn't it? But even then, we're struggling a little bit because of the depth. The other thought I had was a bifold sort of double hinged system, so that would slide back up, because a lot of camper vans just have straight backed sofas, which isn't that comfortable. So we could do it that way, a bit more like a rock and roll style bed, and then pull it out. That'd be 70 minus. So our gap here in the middle is 120. So we could just make 400mm boxes. But it just means the gangway down the middle, the walkway, is only 400. But maybe that's not such a bad thing, bearing in mind we want it to be a bed most of the time. If we were to do that, then of course we could just have a simple hinged section which folded over and rested onto the other side, and of course this would be made up of slats. Maybe we should just go that way. So there we go. By trying to get this van to do just about every trick in the book, it's proving to be a little bit more long-winded than a conventional camper, but it's good fun and we're working our way through it. Now we've given ourselves a deadline that we're going to go away the end of May, so that's 4 weeks to get the whole van completed. Some of you will be very glad to know that, because there's been quite a lot of videos on it. So anyway, I'll do a video in the next few days, which will be getting to grips with all the appliances. Everything's arrived now, so we're just going to start putting things together. Hopefully you get an idea of how the beds are going to work. So next up will be the kitchen, the units, and of course we still haven't even done the electrics and wiring. Everything's pre-routed in place, but we need to connect all that up. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. There'll be plenty of videos coming out, so you can click down below and click that bell symbol and you'll get a notification every time we post a video. But that's it. Give us a thumbs up, always appreciated. Thanks for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.